The Middle East was hammered by the double whammy of the coronavirus lockdowns and a collapse in oil prices. But tourists are returning, businesses are trying to get back to normal, and even Saudi Arabia says there's light at the end of the tunnel. We check in on how the Gulf is coping in this Bloomberg Special 2020 Year of Crisis, the Middle East Impact. When we last spoke to Dubai tourism in April, the prospect of reopening one of the most popular destinations in the world to international tourists still seemed far off. But on July 7th, the Emirate finally opened its gates cautiously. Visitors must take a COVID-19 test before their flight and also show the airline a negative result. Otherwise, they are tested on arrival and required to isolate while awaiting the results. We spoke to the Director General of the Department of Tourism and Commerce Marketing, Hilal El-Merri.
When we think about outlooks and expectations, right now we look at it in sort of two senses. The first of all, definitely tourism globally has been affected. And as you know, the UNWTO has talked about $1.2 to $3.3 trillion may be the impact on tourism revenues. We've gone through this pause phase where the whole world has been paused. And now, we're seeing a gradual opening up of the markets. And, we're looking forward to seeing aggressive growth coming once things normalize towards the year end. It's been definitely a roller coaster over the last 10 weeks. We're definitely in a much better place today. People are much more optimistic, and we're seeing it as definitely something very positive. Another thing, that I have to mention is, as with the public markets, people are looking through this pandemic. Definitely, as countries get things under control, as things normalize, we definitely see the other side as being a very quick rebound to tourism.
Yeah. Hilal, we are all about numbers at Bloomberg. And so what I want to try and do is get a bit of a bigger picture view from you. You said you would hope that there would be an aggressive return to growth, to the numbers. What is the kind of base case that you're looking at in terms of how many people are going to come to Dubai, say, in August, in September, or even as early as July?
Look, I think when you're looking at July and August, as I said, it really depends on the opening up. We're definitely in touch with all governments around the world. And as you know, some airports around the world are not open yet. If we take July, Emirates is flying to 50 locations. We're definitely working very closely with them on the opening up. The 380s will be back in action by the middle of the month, flying to London and Paris. So you could see, the month of July and August are very important to us. And as we build that network globally, we definitely are looking to see good growth. Now, post the summer, assuming things go well this quarter and the opening up happens and the rest of the world, we got out the door pretty early and the rest of the world also opens up. We expect to see the last quarter of the year much improved.
Hello, what is the risk? We've got quarantines around the world. So if we want to travel, if we want tourists to come here, they have to quarantine at the moment when they return. When do you reasonably expect those quarantines, for example, in Europe and the UK, to be lifted? Is that the alpha to scaling up?
Look, I think it's a very good question about Europe and the UK. It's definitely an evolving situation. As you know, these lists are getting updated every couple of weeks with these air bridges. And our government here is in discussion with the agencies and governments over there. And countries like us, who've definitely taken the WHO advice of test very seriously, seem to find themselves at a slight disadvantage in these early days because unless you're all looking at the same metrics, which is number of positive cases per test per 100,000, you can't see that as a challenge. Of course, keeping that in mind, Dubai has an extremely diversified market strategy. And as you mentioned, and when we're first opening up, as I mentioned, 50 markets is what we're immediately starting with. So we're not relying on any specific market or region. But you're right. I mean, we need to move past this phase, and we need to make sure that people can travel without quarantine.
Well, as optimistic as that sounded, the CEO of Dubai-based property giant Amar says his company is preparing for the possibility of lockdowns returning in September or October. But Mohammed Al-Abbar thinks businesses will be getting back to normal by mid-2021. He spoke exclusively to my colleague Manus Krani at the AI Everywhere conference.
We start planning for the possible September, October lockdown, because there's nothing guaranteed. What we learn from this unfortunate, scary event is that there's nothing guaranteed. I had to hop to my office in Serbia 2 weeks ago, and nobody was wearing any mask. People were living normal life. I had to do the same, and now they've got a curfew after 6 or 7 p.m. I think there's a lot of issues over there. It's still safe, but things are not guaranteed. Things do change quickly, so we are moving forward, and we are very optimistic. The government have done an unbelievable job, and Your Excellency, I really want to thank you and everyone else that's involved in the government, federal or local. Just unbelievable what happened in this country. So we want to keep that, and we want to guard that, because we don't want to go back to those, I call them dark days and nights. And running big businesses like all of you and like myself, I think we probably had muscle pain, stomach pain for a whole 2 months. We didn't know where this thing is going, because we're not used to this. I don't care how brilliant you are, but this is an attack on humanity. So I hope we learn.
And as you say, we take the precautionary measures. We did more so perhaps here than other nations. I know that earlier you had said you expect normality to return. When you look at the figures, do you still think normality will return? Do you still think it's the middle of next year, or are you more optimistic now since you last made that statement? I
think most of us, we really believe in science. A lot of people putting a lot of the emphasis on scientists working all over the place. I think I'm more optimistic than some of my friends. So I think science will come and save us. But also we are learning. We're becoming better human beings. We are respecting ourselves. We're respecting social distances and the whole, all the guidelines. I think yes. I think next year we should. Of course, some industries will do better than other industries. I mean, even if the world is safe, how many older people will be comfortable to go and travel? That's another thing. But I'm optimistic that next year, this time, we should be in a good shape.
Up next, the CEO of Qatar Airways tells us why he thinks air travel won't be the same for 2 or 3 years, but is confident his company is doing better than its Gulf rivals. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back. The CEO of Qatar Airways says his carrier is faring better than its Gulf rival as the COVID crisis continues to ravage the industry. Akbar al-Bekr spoke to Bloomberg's Simone Foxman about the future of air travel, but also about the company's partnership with Cathay Pacific, whose share price has been decimated by the pandemic.
We are doing much better than all of them put together. We have been focused very clearly to the opportunities all during the pandemic. Qatar Airways has been operating a lot of our schedule, both passenger and mostly cargo, and we will continue to do so because we see that there is an upturn of passengers who want to go. A lot of them are still stranded in many other countries who are just waiting to travel. It is important for you to note that still there are many airports that are closed, and airports are announcing their opening schedule, and then 2 or 3 days a NOTAM is put out, and then the opening of the airport is delayed by further 2 or 3 weeks. This is creating a lot of confusion and impact on our airline because we are taking forward bookings, and then at the last moment we have to inform our passengers that so-and-so airport has now delayed its opening, and it is impacting both our business, and it is impacting our reputation because passengers expect to travel as and when they book.
Right. And it's difficult to travel these days. You have to wear PPE. You have to go through the whole process. I understand. Have you seen, are you looking very far ahead? Are you looking at any opportunities? I know you've been very acquisitive in the past. So, of course, that's something we have to ask. Has anything opened up opportunities for expansion in the long term?
Yes, we see that there are opportunities. and we will tap on those opportunities. Unfortunately, I cannot give you the details of those opportunities, but people now should be prepared that there will be a new normal for traveling. It will not be the same, or at least it will not be the same for at least the next 2-3 years, when people will have confidence in the treatment and the vaccine that is now being developed by the scientific and medical communities. People need to gain the confidence and, of course, be able to monetarily be capable of traveling. You know, a lot of people have lost jobs. A lot of people's business have collapsed. A lot of airlines have folded. So things is not going to be normal for quite some time.
One of the other situations that has kind of come to the fore recently has been the unrest in Hong Kong, not to mention coupled with COVID-19. Do you still have confidence in Cathay Pacific being able to recover? I know you're a large shareholder there. And how would you approach that as an investor?
I have absolute confidence in every airline that we have invested. Cathay Pacific is no different to any other airline. Every single airline in the world, including Qatar Airways, is affected by this pandemic. And I think that Hong Kong will rebound. Hong Kong is a very important destination. It's a very important financial center. It's a very important business center. And it is part of a very major player in the international market, that is the People's Republic of China. So I think that Hong Kong will certainly rebound, and things will be different maybe 2-3 years down the line. And Cathay has already stated its intention to continue its operation in Hong Kong and continue to grow.
I want you to put on your shoes as a Secretary General of the National Tourism Council for a second. I know you must be looking at Dubai, which has reopened to tourists as of July 7th with a PCR test. Qatar has been a little bit more hesitant to do that. Do you see, how closely are we watching this, and are you thinking that this might be a move that Qatar could take in the near future?
First and foremost, I want to tell you that I have to put my tourism hat and not my tourism shoe. Secondly, I would like to mention that our first priority is protecting the population and the citizens of my country. We don't want to be so desperate that we take risks, which could be a health hazard and could have a second peak in my country. My country has been progressing very well. There is a huge reduction in the past couple of weeks of nearly 84,000 in the infection rate. So what I would prefer to do is not to jump the gun and start bringing people. We need to make sure that whatever we do opening our country, that we do in a very wise and very calculated manner, so that all the people that live in my country, in Qatar, are properly protected before we open up.
Up next, Saudi Arabia has been hit hard by both the pandemic and the collapse in oil prices, but the central bank governor says there is light at the end of the tunnel. We hear from Ahmed Al-Khulaifi next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back. Let's get an update on the situation in Saudi Arabia now. The central bank governor says he sees the light at the end of the tunnel for the economy as consumer spending picks up. I spoke exclusively to Ahmed Al-Khulaifi about his outlook for the kingdom's recovery.
I think it's too early to say a V-shape because barring any downside risks that coming from the second wave of the virus, for example, or more negative developments in the global economy, we remain, we see light at the end of the tunnel, yet we remain vigilant, to be honest.
Governor, since the coronavirus hit, you've stepped in with all kinds of liquidity support programs. Some of them are due to expire in September. What happens then? Do they get extended?
Well, we have a program of support that has three elements. The first one was targeting the SMEs the deferral payments or the funding for lending with 95% guarantee and affordable cost, and also the guarantees paid on behalf of the SMEs to the Kafala program, where we guarantee, we pay the fees for them. The earlier program, particularly the deferral of payments, was very successful, with a 70% increase on the assigned amount. And the second one was the injection, the pure injection of liquidity of also 50 billion Saudi riyal, which came later on, right after opening the economy in June 1st. The aim was to enhance the banking liquidity and enable the banks to lend more. And this has given banks more room in terms of liquidity. And the third one was the open market operation, which was commenced at the end of June, where we did not see really a strong appetite coming from the bank, given that we still have plenty of liquidity. So back to your question, whether we might extend or not, this we are still reading all the indicators, but this will depend on the real sector when it comes to the first program particularly.
Last time you didn't really take a view, and then we had the NCB Samba deal, right, to the tune of about $16 billion. Are you at this point encouraging more M&A in this sector?
You don't want to put it like you say encourage, but we here in SAMA, we see the M&A as a signal of dynamism in the financial sector. As a regulator, we don't see harm if the two institutions find themselves, they have the desire to merge, and they find themselves that they can add value to the sector, and we agree with that, and they add value to the economy, and that's what we saw in both mergers. The first merger, which did not take place, we agreed when they showed intention to merge, and we agreed when they showed intention to separate and end the deal. This time also we agreed when they showed intention to merge. And let's remember that still this is in the initial stage, and they are still in the process of the merger and acquisition, and it will be subject, by the way, to the approval of all the regulators, including the General Authority for Competition.
Governor, the Saudi foreign currency reserves have been front and center of much of our coverage in terms of understanding the impact of both the coronavirus and the lower oil prices. We're still at the lowest level since 2011. What is a recovery on that front likely to look like as you look to the second half of 2020 and into 2021?
Well, the level is still comfortable as we see it right now, 450 billion US dollar, with around 40 months of coverage of imports of goods and about 80% of the broad stock of money. We did not see significant changes at the end of this month with the preliminary data. Our readings, of course, what impacted this was the transfer of the 40 billion Saudi riyal to the PIF, which was a strong hit, a one-off transfer, but it was a strong hit. What will support our reserve, as you can tell, is if there is more positive signals coming from the oil market, which we see them right now.
Meanwhile, the CEO of SABIC says that the recovery from the coronavirus pandemic may not come until 2022. But speaking to my colleague Manus Krani in an exclusive interview, Yusuf Al-Banyan said that his company has a strong balance sheet and can't cope with the current challenges in the global economy.
G20 leaders, especially the finance ministers and central banks, they have been extremely proactively coming with a stimulus package that is really to support the economy. But I would like to highlight very important elements. I think we should not load all the challenges in the global economy in the pandemic. We have started experience some slowdown on the fourth quarter 2019. And I think the pandemic has just accelerated the slowdown in the global economy, and it created a sudden shock to the system. But we have seen a very good positive response from the regulators and the G20 leaders, specifically the finance ministers and central banks, where they have learned from the previous crisis, where they took their time to come up with a stimulus package. But this time the issue is not only the stimulus package. The issue, I think, we need to look at certain fundamentals of the global economy that enable us to look at structural changes related to digitizations, related to our ability to have a free trade. And more importantly, also, we should not lose sight from a very key principles, sustainability, and also people developments and human capital developments. I think it's very important that we don't lose sight of them, because normally through crisis, people forget about those long-term issues, and including, of course, integrity and compliance, which is very important for our B20. We have really dedicated a special task force to address compliance and integrity.
Yusuf, can I ask you to put on your other hat for a moment? I mean, those are the global issues, but you are running probably one of the most preeminent touch pieces of the global economy in SABIC. You talk about that slowdown began before COVID. So give the world a sense of what kind of recovery you are seeing in terms of demand and the shape of recovery that's coming across your desk.
I mean, let me just start with the positive remarks. I mean, people are really talking about a second or probably a third wave of coronavirus. I think what we have seen, all governments have been able to lock down their system, not in order for them to see how this is going to really unfold, but also to build the capacity to deal with this current crisis. I think that the entire world recognizes that they cannot lock down the economy. They need to go back into normality, and they have to build the resilience in their system and citizens to deal with such a pandemic. Therefore, I see, despite the fact of any second or third wave, which people are talking about, is not going to push the economy to a complete lockdown based on our previous month's experience. In terms of the outlook for the economy, I think if we need to look at a positive recovery that is beyond or basically reference to 2018, I think that will be on the first or second quarter of 2022. So we will have this year and next year a year of recovery, and that will be subject to different industry, different economy that will be well positioned to deal with those challenges.
Do you think, from the business side, and this is specifically about SABIC, you had to deal with the crisis. You suspended new capex earlier this year. Is that going to be enough, or do you think you're going to have to do more, given what you're seeing?
Well, I think it's we need to look at this beyond just the capex. I think we, as a company, we have a duty to make sure that we have a very strong, reliable, safe assets to secure a safety for our people and also the society and community surrounding our assets. That's initial top priority for us. And then we go into a mode of understanding how can we protect SABIC balance sheets, credit rating, in addition to continue having a very clear support to our dividend policy. And that, of course, also need to be driven with our growth strategy to come up with how we're going to manage our capex. I think what the entire economy is facing is require a discipline on how we're going to bridge from today until 2022. What I can assure you that SABIC has a very strong balance sheets, enable us to really cope with the current market challenges. And as you can see from our first half of this year, we have announced a first half dividends of 1.5 SAR.
That's it for our special program, 2020 Year of Crisis, Middle East Impact. Stay tuned to Bloomberg TV and radio for continuing coverage on the story. And check out Bloomberg.com for the latest news and analysis 24 hours a day. I'm Yusuf Gameluddin. This is Bloomberg.